Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Well, we're done with Paul Smith's run for Uncanny X-Men, but we still got one issue left in the From the Ashes trade, wrapping up the whole Madeline Pryor storyline. So, we're going to take a look today at Uncanny X-Men number 176. But before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, what you can do is in the description, there's a link to my Patreon, and if you subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. So yeah, as I said, the main focus in this issue is going to be the end of the Scott Summers, Madeline Pryor relationship storyline. They fell in love, they went through some trials where Scott and everybody else thought maybe she was actually Dark Phoenix fucking with him, which was largely prodded by Mastermind. But they got through all that, and they're a stronger team for it, maybe, probably. And at the end of the last issue, Scott and Madeline got married. It's the first ex-wedding. So in this issue, Scott and Madeline are going to be flying off to their honeymoon. And this one is going to have a completely different artist. As I said, we're past the Paul Smith era now. We're entering the John Romita Jr. era. Like, you hear about it, but I think you mostly hear about it for the artist. In terms of storylines, I don't know that there's a whole lot going on in Uncanny X-Men that really makes an impact for the next, I don't know, up until about issue 200, which is what we're going to be looking at next time. So we can start on the cover with this one. This apparently is both penciled and inked by John Romita Jr. There's a little missive in the back here with a letter by Jim Shooter to Wheezy, talking about the cover here, how he doesn't like the idea of breaking up the logo. But since he's being nice guy, Jim Shooter, since this letter is being published in the issue, he's going to let it slide. Honestly, looking at it, I'm not fond of how they did this with the black. It just looks like somebody scribbled over it a little bit. But it's fine, I guess. I mean, it's just the one issue. I don't have a huge problem with it or anything. And the cover itself, it's pretty good. It's more action-oriented, which is more up John Romita Jr.'s alley. We did get a peek of what his art would look like on this title at the end of the last issue, which is a little rough, because, I mean, we are seeing 30 pages of Paul Smith before that, which is gorgeous stuff. And then, at the end, it's nice. It still looks good. Like, John Romita Jr. is still a good artist. He's very skilled, but it doesn't have that same finish. So we're going to see a fair bit of that in this one. All right, so this is going to be Decisions, with Chris Claremont writing, John Romita Jr. penciling, Bob Wyacek inking, Glynis Wein coloring, and Tom Morzachowski lettering. It's a weird little time period because we got Glynis Wein and Louise Jones instead of Glynis Oliver and Louise Simonson. Anyway, we're starting out somewhere over the South Pacific where Scott is going to distract Madeline from flying a plane, which seems ill-advised. It's a nice splash to start with things out with. One thing I've noticed about John Romita Jr. around this time is that he doesn't have a whole lot of nuance about expressions. This one's pretty good, though. This surprise shot. And we're going to get Cyclops looking a fair bit like Matt Murdock. Well, like 1980, whatever, 687 Matt Murdock. But that's okay. I'll tell you, one thing I miss is New Wave Cyclops. From issue 169 by Paul Smith. It was 170, I forgot. But yeah, New Wave Cyclops. Just, the hair is a little tighter. Everything's tighter. But, New Wave Cyclops had some style. Yeah, this Cyclops, his floppy hair is much looser. Everything is a bit loose. That's okay, I suppose. And not a whole lot going on to start things off, other than they're flying off to their honeymoon. I think I've said that 2 or 3 times. And Madeline looks out the window to see a storm front coming up behind them here. So they're going to have to, hope that it doesn't catch up with them before they get where they're going. Or maybe it peters out or something. And while they're flying, Madeline brings up the subject of the Starjammer, because they're going to be leaving soon, and she wonders if he's made his decision yet about going to join his dad in amongst the stars. And apparently he hasn't yet. Dude went and got married, and still doesn't know if he's going to be staying on Earth. That seems like a kind of decision that, maybe he shouldn't be making by himself at that point. If you'd stayed boyfriend, girlfriend, and then you go, you know what, I think I will go do swashbuckling shit in space. Want to come with me? She can still say no at that point. I mean, she technically can here, but it's a little tougher. Although, I gotta think, an annulment at that point would probably be pretty easy. He left the fucking planet. Sorry, as the resident divorce guy, I guess my mind just kind of naturally goes to, how do superheroes get out of marriage anyway? So while they're discussing this, They run into a line squall, so a piece of the storm that's kind of moving ahead of the rest of the storm. They get caught right in the middle of it. Turbulence hits them pretty hard. They get hit by lightning, which shorts out the system, and Cyclops isn't able to hold it, and they end up going into a tailspin. But you see what I mean with the lack of nuance, with the expressions. These lines are really thick, too. Like, much more so than it feels like Paul Smith's would have been. This stuff here, of course, naturally. It seems like John Romita Jr. does an awful lot of drawing with the side of the pencil lead. That said, the storytelling's all clear. And I mean, these aren't particularly, eye-catching sort of pages. It's really more just kind of storytelling stuff. So from there, we're going to cut to Agarashima. That's a familiar name. In the northern Japanese prefecture of Miyagi, ancestral seat of Clan Yashida. And Mariko is woken up by a sword getting thrown on her bed. That's rude. Turns out Wolverine came back. She mailed him the sword. Remember last time we saw Mariko, he showed up at her house, right here, with the sword that he had won from her father. And she was still under the thrall of Mastermind, saying that he wasn't worthy and all that kind of shit. And so Wolverine, of course, is like, okay, if I'm not worthy, take your fucking sword back. I don't want anything to do with it. And he gets back to the States, and she mails him the sword again. Like, make up your goddamn mind. And obviously, now that Mastermind has been, taken out of the picture again, Charles Xavier has been through Mariko's mind, and he's kind of tried to heal the psychic damage. And Wolverine's position, because he might be, hundreds of years old, but he still thinks a bit like a child, apparently, is, okay, Charles fixed you, so we should be right back at square one, right? So, let's do the wedding again. What the fuck? But now Mariko's in the position because she accepted Silver Samurai, her half-brother, who's a member of the Yakuza, wholeheartedly into the family while she was under Mastermind's control. So now the Yashida clan is kind of inextricably linked with the Yakuza. And she feels it's a point of honor to purge her clan of any ties to the Yakuza before she goes about rekindling, the relationship between her and Wolverine. So kind of a reflection of what Wolverine did in the miniseries, where he had to prove himself worthy to win the hand of Mariko. Now she feels she has to do the same thing to win his hand, essentially. It's a nice little scene. I would assume this is the last we're going to see of Mariko for a while. JRJR goes super simple on Wolverine here. When you see him from the front, he's like next door to a silhouette. And I'm not too fond of what he's doing with Mariko's face here. Again, he doesn't really have much of a grasp on expression. This is the same as this. This, he's trying to do more of a determined kind of look, I think. And she just kind of ends up looking squished. It's interesting because, he's still a young artist at this point. So things like having the page layouts and storytelling ability, all that kind of stuff, under his belt now, at least to the point where he can be a competent comic book artist. That's impressive enough. He's still got a ways to go to fine tune. I'm not sure if he ever really gets there. That's okay. You get different artists for different kind of projects anyway. John Romita Jr. just isn't a subtle kind of guy, at least when it comes to art, Okay, so from Logan and Mariko, we're going to cut back to Scott and Madeline, who have survived their plane crash miraculously, but their plane is literally dead in the water. So they're going to have to get out on the wings and see if they can fix the engine. Interesting version of just drawing it out in the water, which is very blotchy inks everywhere. I think it works. So they're just kind of, newlywed bantering back and forth. Madeline offers a kiss as incentive, so Scott's going to lean in, and of course, he's not paying attention, so he slips right off the wing, which prompts a shark to jump out of the water at him. And he has to fend it off with his eye beams. And they kind of have a laugh about it afterwards, and, then they got to settle down and try to get back to the business of fixing the plane before the storm rolls in. But in the meantime, the shark, recovering from the concussive blast, gets pulled down by some tentacles, because this is apparently that kind of story. But you see here, as soon as he's got to draw some figures doing something, all of a sudden it becomes a bit more interesting to him, it feels like. And then we're going to cut to Washington, D.C. So I think this is more setting up stuff for the next little while, where Henry Gyrich is going to go sit in on I believe a National Security Council kind of meeting. And the focus of the discussion is going to be on mutants. That is the sort of thing that Guy Ritchie is probably going to be interested in. So they're going to open naturally with Magneto. Apparently, recently, the Russian city of Veracino was destroyed by volcanic upheaval, which devastated the region and was not natural in origin. And this was caused by Magneto. He did warn the populace in advance long enough that they could all get out. So nobody was actually killed. But this was done as more of a show of power that if he can do this here, he can do this anywhere. And this was sort of a part of a cycle of retaliation. Originally, Magneto made a proclamation that the governments of the world were going to bow to him or face annihilation. And the Russians said, fuck you, and shot a bunch of nuclear missiles at him. And the submarine that they shot them out of, Magneto actually sunk, which would come back, I think, a few times. So then from there, he goes on to wipe out Veracino, and presumably he was intending to move on to more cities, but nobody's too sure exactly what happened. Whether he was bluffing, or he changed his mind, or somebody stopped him in, say, Uncanny X-Men number 150 maybe. But had he persisted, their calculations would have granted him a strong possibility of success, even against the opposition of such so-called superhero groups as the Avengers. And then we're going to move on there, just to the topic of superheroes in general. The research further indicates that were the Avengers themselves to attempt the conquest of the Earth, they could do so with ease. Which is, of course, a subject that gets brought up every once in a while, but probably not nearly as often as it could be. And then from there, we move on to mutants in general, about how they're an evolutionary offshoot of humanity, or the next species, or whatever the fuck. So this is, again, another touchstone issue. And there's that Cyclops hair again. It's 1983, all right. Now, we had Val Cooper speaking on this. I didn't realize she was a character this early. And in this case, she's speaking on behalf of humanity, against the mutants, oddly. Well, oddly for me, anyway. I'm used to knowing Val Cooper from X Factor. And now I can actually kind of see why it would have been a little awkward to have her heading that thing up. Okay, so yeah, making some connections. And Val proposes the idea of what if countries sponsor specific mutants as spies or assassins, that sort of thing. And in this case, Guy Ritchie is a proponent of the wait-and-see philosophy, where he feels like if humanity makes any kind of move, they may set the mutants off, that sort of thing. I believe he's got other motivations as well, but they don't talk about that right here. And Val comes back with, that's all well and good, but are the Russians going to see it that way? Because, of course, Cold War's going on. Or any other country, for that matter. So, yeah, I think this is setting up stuff for the next little while. Then we cut back to Scott and Madeline on the wing of their plane, because I guess they're the focus of this issue. It's a weird issue. So the storm is really starting to kick up now. And they just kind of got to keep trying. They try the repairs one more time. Man, Scott is not looking too great. It seems like the engine's coming along for a minute, but then it kind of blows out on them again. And they get back to work on fixing the engine. Yeah, this is kind of a weird little through line. I'm reasonably sure the whole point of this little, the A story here is just to have something to prop up all these subplots around. Because there's like nothing going on, really, in the Cyclops story. So from there, we're going to cut to New York City. In fact, we're going to cut to under the city, to the home of the Morlocks. And Caliban goes into his, I guess it's like an apartment kind of thing, and finds Mask, Callisto, and Sunder waiting there for him. Some of this stuff isn't too bad, this background stuff, although I feel like that's in large part because of the colorist. Oh shit, it's the NBC Saturday morning cartoon lineup. I never did see Thundar the Barbarian. So Callisto, of course, was deposed as leader of the Morlocks, in part because of Caliban's help, actually. And while they're just having a nice little chat, Mask finds a photo of Shadowcat, and Caliban, first he's angry, but then opens up that, Kitty Pryde promised that if Caliban helped her to free the X-Men, that she was going to stay with him. And she kind of lied about that. And a couple of issues from now, that will get resolved. And in the meantime, we're going to just kind of focus on the fact that Callisto is sort of making plans to get back the leadership of the Morlocks. And then cut back one more time to Scott and Madeline. They think they probably have the engines working this time. So Madeline goes to haul up the anchor, but some tentacles pull her under. Scott doesn't see what exactly pulled her under. He just saw her go over the side, so he dives in after her, which is when he sees the tentacles. So he just kind of, tries to blast it without hitting her. And then, of course, gets grabbed himself, gets pulled down. That's a nice panel. These getting pulled down panels aren't too bad. Feels like there's a bit more detail, and he's able to do a bit more with the vertical. And again, just like bodies doing stuff. He seems, like this kind of stuff. He's a little better with this, as opposed to standard shocked face, So anyway, turns out it's a giant octopus for some reason. Cyclops takes off his glasses to give it a healthy blast, which does release them, but another tentacle immediately kind of slaps over his eyes here, and he loses track of his glasses. Some of this stuff isn't too bad. I think I like the inking here on the tentacles, that kind of thing. It's John Romita Jr. tends to have a pretty sloppy approach to pencils, as far as I've seen. But I know Wyacek can be pretty slick when he wants to be. So with the tentacle over his eyes, he's able to go full blast without worrying about hitting Madeline. So gets free again. They get up to the surface, but snags him again. And, the only way he can see is by opening his eyes and shooting lasers. So he looks down at the octopus and gives him a full power blast, which, possibly kills it. It swims back up to the surface. Madeline grabs onto him, and because he can't see where he's going, he's, another octopus. But, she tells him it's her. And they make their way back onto the plane. And Scott breaks out his cowl because that's all he's got now, just to be able to see. It's funny, we're not going to get another laser blast out of him. This is just basically so he can, these are his glasses now. So they get into the cockpit here. Decent looking control panels. Fire up the engines one more time, see what they can do. Smooch for luck. Nice shot of Madeline. There haven't been too many in here. Look at that shit. Yeah. And try the engines one more time, and they do kick up this time. And they're able to fly off above the storm. Big triumphant moment. So at least now they're back in the air again, but they've got no instrumentation, they've got no communications, and they got a very long way to go to try and find a very small island in a really big ocean. But after fighting with the giant squid, and all the shit that Cyclops generally goes through, this is like piece of cake territory. And all of this has kind of put things in perspective for him a little bit, somehow, where he realizes he wants to be here on Earth with Madeline and the squids. He's going to tell Corsair first thing he can that he can leave without him, but he wants to stay here with Madeline and try to see if he can raise a family. And that's kind of where we end things, and they fly off into the night. And that's it for Uncanny X-Men 176. And that was kind of it for Cyclops as a regular member of the X-Men, actually. He would come back a little bit here and there, but this was kind of meant to be Cyclops' retirement. And that'll get kind of hammered home in issue 201, which we will be featuring later this week. But an idea Chris Claremont had was, why do X-Men have to stick around on the team forever? Maybe they can resolve their personal conflicts and actually, move on with their lives and go and, settle down someplace and come back every once in a while for adventures, but then go back to their family, whatever personal life they've set up in the meantime. So really, this and Uncanny 201 were meant to be a send-off for Cyclops. The only problem, of course, is that X-Men is too fucking popular around this time. And it would get more popular from here until, you get to 1986 and they release X Factor #1, where they bring back all of the original members. Why? Because we need more X titles. And you go, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, because Scott's off in, probably Alaska, thinking about it, with Madeline. And at some point very soon, they're going to have a kid, actually. And the original team had Jean. Jean's dead. You can't bring Jean back. Well, you can bring anyone back theoretically. But we'll get more into that as we get into Uncanny 201, I think. So getting back to this issue here, we should sum things up a little bit. After all of the issues that we've been through over the last 6 or 7 issues that have had pretty significant events happen, actually, that have kind of changed the X-Men a fair bit, this ends up being a really missable issue. I guess if you were reading it monthly at the time, you'd pick it up regardless. And, even if you just happened to miss it, there might have been a sense of, wait a minute, where the fuck did Cyclops go? And what's all this business with these National Security Council hearings? Why did the Morlocks all of a sudden decide to, you don't need to see the moment of decision when the Morlocks go, okay, we need to do something about this business with Kitty Pryde. Yeah, this is just kind of a very unnecessary issue overall. I mean, it's kind of a transitional thing, and you do need to have these one-shot issues where you're just kind of killing time every once in a while. Not everything can be part of some huge overarching narrative. It's just a little surprising, I guess, given what's gone directly before it. I don't know. I mean, overall, it's fine, and it does end up planting some seeds for the next, I don't know, year, 2 years, maybe even. It's just, I can't imagine too many people go back and go, yo, I gotta go reread that issue where Cyclops fights the giant squid. Because that is kind of all that happens here. But then again, it does end on like a happy note for Scott and Madeline. I guess that's important. Particularly after the shit they put each other through. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. That'll give you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. And you can go and join the Blood Force Discord server. I don't have anything different to say about it since yesterday. It's still Zombie Day. Every day is Zombie Day. So yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.